Hey everybody, despite the fact that we have enough space and no weird pillars in the middle of the room and all that, this is IDR. And we're going to start in just a minute or two, so please start finding a place to sit if sitting's your thing. Bring your conversation to a close, stuff like that. I don't see clipboards on the desk, so I hope that means that they're already circulating around. Yeah. I guess they are. Okay, everybody, I see Sue coming back in the room. Things are circulating. People have settled down. Let's get started. The note well is the same note well that I projected last time. It's still a tiny little eye chart. Sorry. And, as always, by participating in the IETF, you actually are sort of implicitly clicking on the shrink wrap having to do with intellectual property you may be walking into the room with. If you want to walk out of the room and still have it be your intellectual property, you might want to keep it inside your head instead of saying it into the mic, but don't believe me, talk to your lawyer. For the agenda bashing portion, the only thing that I have to say is, versus what the published agenda is, as we mentioned on Monday, we'll use extra time at the end of the agenda, of which we have a notional 30 minutes for additional conversation about the BGP LS update draft. So that, do we have a minute taker?
Okay, Linda's going to help us. I'll try here. We'd appreciate, because some of this discussion may be free-flowing, if you do part of the discussion, go back and log onto the Etherpad and check that. See, Linda and those of us who are trying to record your information have done a good job. Thank you.
Yep, and as always, though actually this group is pretty good at it, please do remember to state your name clearly if possible at the mic when you make comments. That was Sue Harris, by the way. Okay, let me get the first slide up. It looks like it's Mahesh.
Wonderful.
Use the clicker or?
No.
We no longer provide that service.
Okay, good.
I'm good. I've done my job.
All right, so I'm going to talk about the BGP Yang model. And before I get started, let me be clear. I'm not a BGP expert. I'm on this draft simply because my Yang expertise. So if you don't like the model, the way it's written, you can complain to me. If you don't like BGP or the structure of it, I'll ask one of the co-authors to pitch in. All right, so status with the 05 version of the draft. We now have support for the routing management module and the routing policy module. The RFC 8349 brought us support for RIB, and you'll see a great many pages added to the draft for that. There was a request to support TTL security. I've added that as a feature. We're not going to support it in the draft. It allows for any implementation to do it by declaring the feature. We did add support for BFT with not only the feature statement, but also for BFT client configuration for liveliness check. When I started, I think the exercise was leading to an explosion of modules. I've managed to collapse that into 3 modules. Everything else now is a submodule. So it makes for easier reading. All right, so I'm going to spend, sorry.
Asen, I know everybody might not want to stay around to the bitter end tomorrow, so that routing policy module, we're getting ready to try and take it to at least a first working group, last call, and Yang director review. So I'd encourage everybody to read it. I clarified a lot of the ways the recursiveness worked. And the way I did it is I did it the way we map the open config model. So it's a bit biased the way I documented it, but I'd like everybody to review it. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for that, Daisy. All right, so I'm going to spend the rest of the time discussing issues and really trying to get input on the draft as much as possible. All right, so the first issue that I've documented is, do we need action statements for something like Clear BGP? Do note that there are no statistics in the model, so we're not trying to clear any statistics. We'll support statistics and then another draft. What I have from right now documented that we will add support for is global level, clear, per address family, and per neighbor. So unless I hear otherwise, that's what we're going to go with supporting in the model. All right, no comments, so I'll move forward. Notifications. So we will add support for notifications as they relate to route updates and neighbor state change. Any comments? I see Jeff.
Actually, I had comments in the prior slide as well, but let's do this one. So yes, you do need clear BGP in terms of being able to reset neighbors as well. The clear routes is probably going to be controversial, just simply because most people don't allow you to sort of...
Can you get a little closer to the mic, Jeff? Thank you.
Certainly. Sorry, is this better? So actually, wiping routes out from the RIBs is somewhat controversial. Some implementations only allow you to do that as part of knocking a peering session over. So that one probably needs to be protected by a feature at best.
Okay.
The statistics, I think my comment there is that the stuff covered by the MIBs probably is worth putting into the base module. And I'd suggest that go in as part of the base rather than extensions. A lot of implementations will have plenty of additional things to put in, but the base should definitely include those.
Okay, so I'll talk to the co-authors to see what we can do to add support for that.
Yeah, simple for RC 4273 MIB stuff. Next slide. So terminology caveat, notification for us means knock over the peering session, but I know what you mean here. For route updates, what is meant in this context?
So I think Keyur can probably clarify, or maybe Sue can. I think, yeah, go ahead. Right. So from a Yang perspective, what it refers to is anytime there is a change to the route entry in the model, that might result in a notification.
If you have a neighbor state change, if you go from a particular state to another state, these are notifications which can or cannot be turned off, notif, or the push notification. Jeff, will you go back to the first issue? Maybe my brain was in IDR chair mode. Just restate what you had problems with again.
For issue number 1?
Yeah.
So yes, we do need things like clear BGP neighbor to reset peering sessions. Administrative reset appears, we do want to permit.
Yes, that's a common function.
Yeah.
Is that a common function that we want in Yang? And your answer is yes. It's
Absolutely, that's a common piece of RPC that we'd want to have.
This is a checking because that's a fairly substantial. You're clearing not the statistics, but you're clearing the routes, the per
Right.
neighbor, family, the per address.
Yeah.
Okay.
And clearing statistics will be controversial from one implementation to another. Some never allow you to change those, some do. So that one might have to be protected by feature.
So
Okay.
we're clearing statistics or
By
the
feature.
routes?
Clearing routes is also very controversial to pick on a certain vendor that starts with a C. They do have the ability in some cases to manually reset and throw away routes that have been learned from BGP.
Yes,
Other implementations only let you do that via policy.
yes. And my question is, you're proposing that it's a good thing that we do and you would like to see the debate start?
I'm saying that for the controversial things, Yang lets us protect those via feature, and
Right.
that's the easy
So
way to do it.
that's what
Okay, so
So,
they're good to have in, and if they're confidential, we can protect them. Okay.
yeah, so we will condition it with the feature statement.
And back to our slide 2 for issues number 2. Notifications for neighbor state change, that makes sense. Those correspond to the 4273 traps that we have for that. Although there's some warnings in 4273 about noises in the state machine from backward transitions as we go through the state machine. I would suggest taking the warning from that one. The route updates one, if that is actually a change of whenever you get a route update, is this unconditional or is this via a subscription with a filter?
It would be unconditional from the perspective of the model. Of course, if there's no one subscribed to that, you don't get anything. But from a model perspective, a notification is generated.
So the problem with that is from the filtering mechanisms that NetConf defined, this is so noisy you'll melt the router. This is something that should only be able to be enabled via configuring a filter in some fashion and propagating down to the BGP module. The direct analogy is turning on tracing for BGP updates and prefixes, and usually on about 4 out of the 5 implementations I'm familiar with, that will increase your CPU use to 115% of what you previously did.
I see.
It's not a good thing to have on by default.
So, by the way, just not exactly a point of order, but something. This is good conversation, and please continue having it. It's fine to have it at the mic, but a lot of it is also stuff that is highly appropriate for, like actual document review and feedback that goes to the list, because it's the kind of detail that gets lost even in good minutes.
Yeah, and in fairness, I have not gotten around to reading the module, and I'm only responding here because it's being raised as an issue at the screen.
Totally fine.
Robert Rashuk, Bloomberg. So I have a clarification on the previous slide again. The clear BGP, most useful form, I have been using it for a long time, is actually with the little knob, let's say with one implementation, soft in, which doesn't clear, so to say, but generates route refresh to a peer. And then I'm synchronizing whatever I'm getting again from the peer locally. So do you have that concept here, or it's foreign?
Okay, I see Kale getting up.
Yeah, it'll be incorporated as part of the route refresh RFC support from a modeling perspective.
All right, moving on. And I know this is hard to read, but hopefully you can go back to the slides. What I'm showing is the route metadata for local rib and the set of parameters. If there's anything that we are missing, feel free to comment on the mailing list or give me feedback. BGP silent community type definition, this is what we have. If this is good enough, we'll let it be, but if you want to further constrain it, do let us know. Same thing for extended community types. I don't have the whole printout here, but it's in the draft. Issue 8 through 17. Now we have placeholders for specific configuration. The expectation is that each Yang module for that, for each one of these is going to augment the BGP base model. My very quick analysis of the last 2 days, just going through some of the drafts, is that there are some drafts that do it, like IPv4 unicast L3 VPN is augmenting the base model, but then we have a whole set of drafts that are not. So just to point out to the authors, some of them who are sitting here, please make sure that you're augmenting the base model.
Okay, Patel, Argus, again, this was highlighted, some of this, speaking as a co-author, this was highlighted in BES working group, and I believe the working group chairs are going to come back and ensure that this should be taken care of. I'm simply relaying what was highlighted.
All right, that's all I have.
Thanks.
Co-chair Hat, thank you, Mahesh, for helping Kara and I get the right gang stuff.
No, sorry, wrong one.
Morning, folks. K. Patel. I'm going to talk about the status of tunnel and KEPS draft. So as part of the status update, version 11 was published fairly recently in February, and as part of version 12 going forward, we now have a new co-author, Sri Hari from Juniper. Eric Rosen has already retired, who was the primary co-author on the draft. The draft is in fairly stable state. We have received numerous feedbacks from lots of folks, including Sri Hari. We've also received a feedback as part of Shepherd review from John Scudder. The draft has changed and the text has been simplified. The comments have been incorporated. Version 12 to be published soon. And multiple partial implementations for this draft exist. So maybe an implementation report going forward to document some of these things. Here are the high-level changes that are coming in from version 11 to 12. Of course, all the references to the tunnel types have been moved from informative to normative. Error handling section has been tightened up. The language for particular X and Y kind of TLVs, tunnel TLVs, restricted to MPLS in GRE and MPLS in UDP. And quite a lot of shoulds have been replaced with must, so that the implementation gets a lot more specific in that regards. Question?
Yes, this is Linda Dunbar from Huawei. I have sent several number of emails asking to resolve some of the issue in this draft. For example, you have this you have this remote endpoint TLV, sub-TLVs, and it's stated can be inserted with every TLV. So if I have a route which can go traverse like multiple egress ports, WAN ports, and I'm not sure, I cannot find it anywhere in the document, should I have like multiple remote endpoint TOVs attached to that route, or should I have announced it 3 times for that update? I sent that question several times, but nobody answered that question.
So I didn't get your complete question. The error handling section now covers text for how the multiple same TLVs should be handled. But if you send the question out again one more time, I'm sure you'll get an answer now.
Okay, I hope so. Okay, I sent it multiple times.
Yeah,
Second-
so can I just interject a thing from the chair and/or document shepherd? I get mixed up with these hats, but I believe there's been sort of will have been enough revisions to the draft that even though we completed one working group last call, it's probably going to be appropriate to take it through another one. So, you know, definitely make sure that you get in your comments by then, if not before. And, you know, that's, as part of the working group last call, we'll be tracking and making sure that we've got, you know, issues closed one way or another.
Okay, that'd be great. A second issue, I see that in the 5512, you have BGP speakers local endpoint address to be included in the update. And in this one, it doesn't mention that. So I asked the question, does it mean a third person, like if between R2 sending the route update, if there's an X can send the same route update on behalf of R2, whether that would be accepted or not? It is not clearly stated in the document. So that's one thing. I thought removing the speaker's endpoint address may mean that, but I cannot find anywhere in the document to address that. I also expressed that in the email, but nobody answered.
So we left it purposefully open, but if you think there is any vulnerability issues, or if you think that has any issue per se, because typically the draft text doesn't prohibit an implementation from doing exactly what you say.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, if you see an issue with that or a concern with that, now is a good time to highlight it to the work on a mailing list.
I do see issues with that. I see an additional function provided by that, additional feature provided that, but also associated with some of the problems with that. So in the email, I identified that. But since this draft, the author seems, maybe Eric was retiring, so nobody cared to answer the
Yeah, happy to
questions.
take care of it.
So a review, Kara, a review of that draft found some of these questions that Linda mentioned, and we were looking at the -12 draft. How do you want us to handle questions? Are you in mid-flight of making some other edits? Should we refer to 12? Do you want them private or on list? I mean, normally, you know, I always like on list stuff, but if you're in the middle of edit for next version, how do you want to take the comment?
I think a particular way to handle it, and from my perspective, it would be super cool if we get it to that point, is to publish version 12 with all the comments that we have received so far, and we have an agreement on the comments.
Okay.
And folks can take a jab at it and follow it up with subsequent comments if they have, and we'll be more than happy to take
Yeah,
care of it.
here's my suggestion is that, like I said, we have, you know, we got through working group last call once, and I'm hoping that the authors and the group think that it's going to be appropriate to move to working group last call pretty promptly again.
Yeah.
So that's exactly, you know, what you outlined is like, you've got a 12 almost ready to go. Put it out there, and then it'll be a good time, you know, a good use of people's time to go and review at that point, and let's just have the whole conversation on the list.
Just to be clear, John, there's a -12 out there right now.
Okay, sorry. Whatever it sounds like you have something in your edit buffer ready to push out, is that?
Yeah,
correct?
as
Okay.
version 12, that incorporates all the comments that we've
So
received.
are you saying people should review what's already published and
Exactly,
comment?
yeah.
Okay, sorry.
What is going to be published soon, to be very
What is
specific.
going to be published? Okay.
As a user of the draft, I also noticed that, and this is working group chair hat off individual contributor hat on. I noticed there's a lot of things that, wow, that's a lot to implement. Are you going to segregate common versus base?
Well, okay, so I would like to have that conversation. I would like to give Keir the opportunity to finish his last two slides, just in case it answers any of the other questions that are coming up to the mic. If you're sure that, you know, your question isn't going to be answered, if it's clarification about something that's already come up, go ahead.
Specifically on this slide, Jeff has the shoulds replaced with musts. Every person in this room that cares about this draft needs to refer to those changes and double check things. Some of the changes and implications may surprise you.
Sounds fair. Sounds like a fair comment, absolutely. Again, as part of changes, separate INR registries have been now created to cover flag fields within ANCAP sub-TLVs. This is just as a part of a good cleanup. Same for the label handling sub-TLV field as well. There is a modification to best path mechanism wherein a rule has been added which says, hey, if a path is considered, a path would be considered unreachable if tunnel ANCAP address is no longer reachable. So there has to be some kind of an reachability check that needs to be done. The routing considerations section has been modified to ensure data forwarding prefers tunnel path over a non-tunnel path, or rather a next hop path for that particular path in which the tunnel ANCAP attribute was received, which means if you receive this attribute, please make sure to make use of it. Section 8.1 is modified to cover label stack for BGPLU as part of tunnel ANCAPs. Finally added a section for IP and IP terminating into WRF, and any minor nits that needed to be fixed are fixed.
Robert Raszuk. So that's more general observation. How about historically, Eric didn't want to add anything here for IPsec and DTLS because he didn't want to put crypto in BGP. And that's fine, right? However, there is use cases, like you will see in next presentation, where just indication of that peer which is willing to establish IPsec with someone else or DTLS with someone else is useful, right? So the question is, why don't you just address it here, adding two new types, and be done with that in the same document?
So when we started off this draft, the idea of this draft, at least with the co-authors that started off this effort, was to replace 5512. And if you notice, the old 5512, it didn't carry an IPsec attribute. It's done as part of a separate RFC. So we said as follow on, once we have tunnel ANCAPs in place and once we have an appropriate infrastructure in place, we would go and cover the IPsec as part of the separate document. Just so happens someone has done it.
We already have something that's updating 5566?
Well,
Or-
that's your next presentation.
Okay.
And the question there remains to be seen is it updating or is it doing more or less?
Okay.
I'm simply saying we were going to take that effort after tunnel ANCAPs was done.
Okay.
But that assumes you actually are putting IPsec information to BGP. But I'm saying the subset of that, it's also very useful.
I don't disagree.
So my suggestion is, again, just like what I would love to do as part of finishing in a working group last calling this draft is, I mean, anything that needs to be changed, fixed, you know, deleted, whatever, about the base spec obviously has to be covered. Anything that's in there that's wrong obviously has to be covered. If anything that looks like, you know, a new tunnel type or extension, I would love to see that come along as a follow-on draft, just because I don't want to have this thing open for writing forever, and it's designed as, you know, a modular and extensible framework. So let's move this one forward and extend it. And I think that what you're describing is a perfect, I don't want to process more drafts than we have to. You know, let's not have a million drafts just for fun. But on the other hand, you know, we got to sort of say, you know, close for writing now, you know, at some point. So, you know, I'm not saying absolutely not, but I am saying let's not churn it infinitely.
Yeah, and from our perspective as co-authors, look, we started off with a certain approach because of how the RFCs were laid out. Happy to consider it and cover it as part of this if the work is absolutely incremental and if that is what working group wants.
And I'd like to respond to the question working group member Sue brought up from the floor, which was, it's a big draft, and kind of what are we going to do about the our implementation requirement. I think I addressed this some on Monday, but now that we're talking about the specific draft, I'd like to address it again. My feeling right now, so sort of, again, this is towards the practicalities of, do we keep this thing in revision mode for an eternity and try to, flip over into a 3-digit, draft number, or do we just finish it? Probably if we had it to go back and do again, I'd say, what would be awesome would be to do, kind of the skeleton part, and in one document, or maybe do it with, just one exemplary tunnel type, and then do all the tunnel types in follow-ons, because then it's clear that your implementation piece is covered. But what we have is we have a document that's got 6 tunnel types called out in section 3, plus several other modes called out in section 3. And my guess is that either no one or almost no one is going to go and implement all of those tunnel types in their first ship. And if we insist on having every single tunnel type checked off in our implementation report, this thing may stay in draft for a long time. So my hope is that the working group is going to be satisfied by saying, we're going to check off the sort of basic functionalities and say we implement at least one tunnel type, and it seems to work, and move forward on that basis. It's not perfect, but I hope that sort of satisfies enough of the requirement.
So speaking as a co-author on the document, and I'm pretty sure I'm speaking on behalf of all the other co-authors, is as we start to take on version 12 and publish version 12, I'm sure we will get feedback. That means we will be editing the document. And while we are editing the document, it'd be great if we can take that call, because we have no problem splitting the documents. But if we do it now, rather than we don't take a call and a year from now we take that call, right?
Yeah, so if you have input on that, the mic, which I see AC going for, would be great, or, to the list or the chairs soon rather than late.
AC Lindum, yeah, I would really support bringing this to completion. And one thing we had with the segment routing drafts in the IGPs, we had a specific piece. It was actually an encoding of RSVP like ERO in those. And we talked to I was the shepherd, and I talked to among the co-authors. And I said, I know nobody's implemented this. Are we ever going to implement it? And they all said, no, probably not. So we took it out. So if there's anything in there you think nobody's ever going to implement, just take it out now.
That's a good suggestion.
This is Linda Dunbar. So I support having those skeleton documents explaining really well how do you update the route, how do you go through the egress ports, and how do you report, and then potential problems of third-party announced for you, all those mechanisms to be described well. And then you may have maybe appendix to describe different kind of encapsulation, because they are all can be treated the similar way, except IPsec.
Sri Hari Sangley, Juniper. Just responding to John's question, I agree with what Keyur is saying. Maybe we put an additional timeline based on the feedback. I don't know, 1 month or some number of weeks. That way we can make a call on either we're splitting now or pushing this through.
How long would you like that timeline to be if you had your choice? Oh, you fall a month out? I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Months is good.
Okay, thanks very much.
Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and publish version 12 and solicit comments. Thank you, guys.
Hello, everyone. Topic here is to use BGP to secure the IPsec configuration. I think last 5 minutes discussion is about, do we want to put this into the current draft, or do we want to separate this as a separated document? For me, I'm fine with either way. I mean, but this presentation is about what it really means. So let's put that aside for a minute, just for focus on the technical side. So problem. I think problem is pretty straightforward. The problem I will try to solve is that in some large networks, you have quite a big number of routers. And then if you want to secure either power traffic or all the traffic between them, typically today you have to do is that you create a large number of IPsec mesh tunnels between them. Sometimes, in order to manage and provision those big number of tunnels is cumbersome, and it's a quite big overhead. So we need a better solution to address such a problem. So design considerations. First, my proposal here is not trying to be a solution for every use case out there. Like I said in the previous slides, all I'm trying to solve problem is that try to solve the confusion and management problem of big number of tunnels. Second, the solution should not trade off of security. We have more details in following slides. And last is to avoid reinventing views. So I will try to reuse existing protocol whenever possible. I'm not trying to come up with like a radically new protocol here. So the proposal is that we cannot extend the current tunnel encapsulation draft to add the IPsec part. BGP is only used for the signal the certain IPsec configuration. But IPsec tunnel itself will be still signaled by the IPv2 itself. So this draft does not introduce any change regarding IPv2. There's only small amount change based on the tunnel encapsulation draft. So here are the changes. First, we need a new TRV for IPsec tunnel. So I propose to reuse current located value 4, which is located by the 556, to reuse that as a IPsec ESP tunnel mode. Because for AH mode, it's rarely used, and I think that right now there's a trend, at least from my studies, to deprecate AH mode. So I propose that we only support ESP tunnel mode. The second is there going to be new sub-TRV for public routing instance. So the public routing instance for IPsec is where the IPsec packets, encapsulated IPsec packets, the routing instance is forwarded in. So which could be different from the payload packets of the IPsec tunnel. So today, I know in many deployments, people are actually using the same routing instance for both payload and the tunnel packets, but for security reason, there should be possibility to separate these two. So we need a separate sub-TRV to signal that. And then there's a new sub-TRV for remote address prefix. So in IPsec tunnel case, there's the idea of there's a concept of the traffic selector, which defines what type of source and destination traffic is allowed on this particular tunnel or the particular child SA. So we need to signal that because that's quite important for the created IPsec tunnel. Since user might want to enforce what type of routes or what type of source is allowed to access the subnet behind me. So there are two. So I define two here. One is for remote, one for the local. So those are all for receive point of view. And the discussion yesterday with Robert, I think the remote one could be optional. There could be other way to, for example, using recursive next of lookup to achieve the same purpose. But I think the local one is necessary. And also it will reuse some existing sub-TRV defined in the tunnel draft. For example, remote endpoint, which give you the IPsec tunnel endpoint address. The color, actually the color we use here to signal the large part of IPsec confusion. Like for example, most importantly, your crypto, what kind of crypto you want to enforce that the other end to use to reach you. And there's some other, whatever other IPsec confusion you wish to map into this color sub-attribute TLV. And last, we might also want to reuse the embedded label handling sub-TLV, because although IPsec tunnel is for IP tunnel payload, but in case, for example, in unicast VPN address family, there's a label there. But for IPsec case, because during the IP tunnel negotiation, you're already aware which private routing instance that you are mapping to. So you don't necessarily need that service label in the update to target that. So in the draft, I propose to use like value 2 of this embedded label. So basically ignore that label in the update. Oh, thanks. So here's the operational example. So you have here example, you have C2 routers, route 1, route 2, right? Subnet A is behind route 1, and some B and C behind route 2. And the user want to enforce the traffic going to be protected by the IPsec tunnel by 2 types of traders A, so red one and yellow one. The red one using like AS256 with SHA-384, mapping to color red, and the yellow means it's using narrow encryption and with only integrity protection SHA-256, which map to yellow, color yellow. So in this case, given such requirements, both R1, R2 are provisioned with the PKI keys and certificate from CMCA. So again, here, so this draft does not propose anything for the authentication credential in BGP. We leave that outside, purposely outside the documents, because with PKI you can easily to achieve that scalable credential provision in the network. So here, both R1, R2 provision certificate PKI keys from CMCA. And R1 will advise subnet A in BGP, which has a tunnel encapsulated attribute that contain IPsec TLVs, so which contain 2 TLVs. First one is a remote endpoint is the tunnel R1, the R1's endpoint address. The color will be red, and subnet in the local prefix sub TLV. So basically, TLV says in order for the source of from subnet B to reach subnet A behind me, you need to use red configuration, IPsec configuration to reach me. Similar for TLV2, which says for remote subnet C to reach subnet A, you need to use color yellow as an IPsec configuration, encapsulation. Then R2 will also advise subnet B, which has 1 tunnel encapsulation attribute that contains 1 IPsec tunnel TLV. Remote endpoint would be the R2's endpoint, and color sub red and A in the local prefix sub TLV. So again, so R2 will advise similar thing for subnet C. So now with these 4 updates in place, so when R1 received a packet from subnet A destination to subnet B, since BGP update includes subnet A, also contains the IPsec tunnel encapsulation attribute, and there's no existing trader say they could use for the traffic. So R1 will choose TLV1 because he will match the packet source and destination address with the local prefix in the received updates. And then he will choose TLV1 and use IPv2 to establish the tunnel. And also because there's a color attribute in the IPsec tunnel TLV, he will know what kind of crypto or what kind of IPsec confusion he should use to establish that tunnel. So that they will create user IPv2 create this first child SA, and with the corresponding ESP transform the cryptos, and with the traffic selector that accordingly. And then after the tunnel is created, R1, R2 now can forward traffic between subnet A and B over the child SA1. And if next R1 receive another packet from subnet A to subnet C, because in this case, although I already have a child SA1, but that child SA1 is only for between subnet A and B, so that they cannot use that child SA. So he need to create another child SA for these packets. Same process happened in as the previous, but now because there's already IKE SA created in previous step to the same peer, so you can use that IKE SA to create a second child SA with different crypto, in this case non-encryption with SHA-256, and with a different set of traffic selector. So now after these two steps, R1, R2 can forward traffic between subnet A and subnet C with the child SA2. This way, both R1, R2 does not have to provision all those tunnels beforehand. It's all packet triggered or dynamic. Okay, summary. So I think the main benefit of this proposal is that it's decouple the IPsec configuration from the key exchange and tunnel negotiation. So which means it's able to leverage both world of developments that can allow both IPsec side and BGP side to evolve independently. Second is by reusing IPv2, which is a field proven mature protocol, which makes sure that key exchange is secure. And last, we only introduce a limited change to BGP, no change to IPv2. And last is that we allow interoperable routers that does not support draft, which allow gracefully transition. Great question.
This is Linda Dunbar. I just put my the head of the I2NSF working group chair on. This particular IPsec configuration through controller has been discussed in the I2NSF in the security area for over a year. So there are lots of controversials there. And so I think this starting here will be better to align with what has been discussed in the security area, to align with what they have done, at least maybe bring it over there or align with there or wait until they finish and then adopt.
Yeah.
Give comments over there.
I read about that draft a while ago. I think that is very different from my draft. I mean, you guys want to download key directly from the controller while I'm using IPv2.
No, I also discuss the child relationship, how the child SA being created, association. So that's one part. So that's definitely need to be aligned. Okay. So the intent is similar. They have two cases, and they have three cases. One is IKE, one is IKE-less, one is SDN controlled.
Yeah.
So there are three cases. So that need to be addressed.
Yeah,
So that's my first concern is the duplication of the discussion, parallel discussion in security area and here. Second concern I have is for the traffic selection for IPsec. Traffic selection is not only based on destination, like the route, like usually BGP update, you update your routes. It can be associated with source and destination and port and many other parameters, so that using BGP to advocate that, propagate that, the remote end doesn't really know the particular policy. The policy has to be coming from the controller, not from the peer. Third part is when you advertise the traffic, the routes, the local device has to be able to be secured enough to authenticate the peer. So the IPsec introduced a whole different dimension because you're dealing with the port facing the untrusted network. It's different from the other network we deal with, where everything is in the wall, in garden.
Yeah, I think I will address your question one by one. So first one is that, like I said, that I'm not trying to be a SDN solution here. And not everybody want to use a controller in the network. I understand it's a pretty hot topic right now, but it's not like every network will start using controller in tomorrow. So second, my draft really is just extension of a current tunnel encapsulation draft in the IDR to cover the IPsec tunnel case. Nothing more than that. And the second, I'm aware that IPsec, that traffic select has a protocol port range. I've been working in IPsec for 10 years now, so I'm very aware of that. But here, especially in the network routing interconnection use case, people usually do not use protocol or port range here. So that's why I want to simplify my draft. Does not want to put too much into the BGP, too much change on the BGP.
Robert Raszuk. So it's not a question to you. It's actually a general observation for the working group. You brought it up, that's why it comes now. So you're asking for addition of the local prefix, and that's very useful. But it's also applicable to all types as currently defined in the tunnel encapsulation attribute. Yeah. Because that's very useful information to have ability to specify from that source to that destination, go through that encap versus the other encap. So it is not in the base spec. And I think that will be very useful to actually consider addition of that tiny bit of information to the base spec.
Yes, I agree. Actually, my last slide, I didn't show you. I want to ask an opinion about that. We should cover more tunnel types if we can.
Jeff, as I have two comments, well, 2.5 comments. First, I do think this is very useful work. Configuration and use of IPsec tunnels has been somewhat painful in BGP before. People have several ways of doing it, and many of them are annoying, which brings me to my 2 points. Point number one, you should add a operational considerations section to your draft talking about how issues with IKE now become part of your troubleshooting mechanism for BGP. So if IKE doesn't work, your tunnel doesn't come up, your routes don't resolve, and this causes a lot of pain for the user that looks like a BGP problem when it really is not.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The second one is your draft intentionally calls out for this in a single administrative domain, which is a good, clear use case, lots of value there. Have you given thought to inter-domain versions of this?
So the reason I say this is most for the single administrative domain is because IPsec need authentication. I mean, sometimes it's hard to have consistent authentication mechanism across administrative domain, especially in the routing interconnection case. That's why I say it's for the single administrative domain.
Yeah, the place where this can be additionally useful, and this is somewhat problematic in terms of how the TE path attributes likely to be deployed for a short period of time, having some general ISP A and some generally ISP Z, completely far ends of things, trying to interconnect with each other, and basically doing IPsec over the internet is a thing that is already done today. But again, see prior comment, it's a very difficult thing because coordinating things like the IKE services across the internet is a tricky thing.
Yeah, I said nothing in the draft, technically nothing in the draft to prevent you to do that. It's just, I think realistically, most people will do it, but I can put some text to clarify that.
And I think it goes back to the core draft, which is how is that attribute expected to propagate over the general internet?
Right. And so 2 things. One is I'd like to say we're cutting the line after care. And the other is this is valuable conversation. And I mean, this is a general comment. Anytime you make a comment at the mic, actually, is send a follow-up email because it's really hard for presenters who do not, are not taking notes as they're presenting to remember all the comments. And we try to get them in the minutes, but send email. Thank you. Go ahead.
Stephanie Koski from Orange, speaking as a best chair. It's more a question to you, John. We have now 4 drafts spread over IDR and BES talking about IPsec within the tunnel encaps. My idea was to try to find just one solution. If it's possible to cover all the cases, I'm not sure that it will be doable. But yeah, we need absolutely to set up the minimum set of building blocks that could be reused for the various use case. After, it's just, where is the home for this work? Do you do it in IDR? Do we do it in BESS? Because I think Ali has a comment maybe on this. He has developed the secure EVPN, which is being able to secure all the service VPNs that we could have in BESS using IPsec. So yeah, where is the home for this?
So I'm not going to try to answer from the chair, but I think we should talk maybe after the meeting or, you know, something like that.
Sue Hare's individual contributor in this moment, +1 on the last comment, and a specific question for the presenter. Have you read Draft Best EVPN Internet Subnet Forwarding? That is the secure VPN draft he had.
No, I haven't.
Okay, I would advise, based on the work that was done there in BEST for a while, that you read that. They're looking at multiple domain. You want to restrict your work, and you clearly state that, thank you, in your draft, that it's a single domain. There's have both single domained and multi-domains. Some of the things that are different with Linda's and my draft is we're looking at gaps in their draft, okay? And we're trying to work with them and work with the I2NSF. I would just note that it might be useful for you as an author. That's just a comment. I have 2 questions. The new subnet TLV for remote address prefix and local address prefix, we explain why you felt that was necessary in addition to the addresses.
Because in IPsec, there's a traffic select concept. So with IPsec, a user could specify which source and destination behind me are allowed over this particular tunnel. So
So
that's
isn't
part of
that-
IPsec protocol.
Isn't that policy that you're putting when you get to prefix, or I'm confused why you
It's
want to
just a list of subnets.
Okay, so you feel you need the subnet in order to do the appropriate
So,
IPsec?
so if you, with my example in my
I
slides,
did
right?
read the sequence. The specific question is, in order to do the IP sec stuff, you feel you need the subnet.
It's mandatory in IPsec protocol.
Yes.
You need a traffic selector.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second, when you're when you're reusing the color, have you thought about conflicts over color amongst people who are using this? I mean, you're defining color and policy equivalently, and you're overlaying it. Every time we overlay things,
No, so
somebody forgets, you know?
No, so when I say color, it's color sub TLV, right? When you put the color sub TLV underneath the IPsec tunnel TLV, which means they have specific meaning for IPsec tunnel, which is defined in my draft. There's no, I don't think there's a confusion there.
But there are many people in many ways. Are you going to lay out exactly how it's going to be
No,
done in
no,
a different draft?
I'm not trying to define any color for any other type of tunnels.
Okay.
Right?
Just let me repeat back so I understand it.
Yeah.
You've said that it's only under the IPsec color, and that's where it is. B, you said that you're going to have multiple people using that IPsec color, otherwise you wouldn't be using BGP, and you're not going to define how it's going to be working. My comment then stands. How are you going to have people not clash?
No,
That's I don't see how, unless you specify a color and you're overloading the color function.
I think I misunderstood your question. I thought you said
that's okay.
other type of tunnel. I thought you between IPsec and the other type of tunnel. If you both using color, there might be confusion. But my point is,
It's like communities in BGP where the consulting exchangers agree on the color.
but my point is that when you put the color sub TLV underneath IPsec tunnel TLV,
Yes, yes.
that's very specific meaning for IPsec.
Then
It should not be any confusion there.
So guys,
we'll let
this
it
has
go.
gone back and forth a few times, and I'd like to suggest you review the draft language and continue it that way. Thank you.
Ali suggested Cisco, just building up on the question that Sue made, secure EVPN, I guess you haven't had a chance to read it, right?
Sorry?
Secure EVPN draft. I guess you haven't had a chance to read it.
No.
Okay. Because some of the material in here overlaps and would be good to, to see what the overlap is and how we do it in that. Secondly, with respect to in here, you're talking about discovering the endpoints and setting up the IPsec session via the IKV2, and still we're going to have the mesh of IKV2 session among the peers. I thought that you were talking about that scale you want to address, but that is not addressed here.
I'm not trying to address the scale
Okay.
problem here. I'm trying to try to scale the amount of confusion here.
Okay. Then the other question, have you had a chance to read RFC 5566?
Yes.
So this is basically the RFC 5566 with instead of using 5512, we are using the tunnel attribute.
Yeah, more like that. I think I put more stuff there than 556.
Okay.
But more or less like that, yeah.
All right. One final question. You're sending a list of prefixes with this attribute of what flows gets mapped to this tunnel, right? You were saying?
So you'll be...
prefixes, you were saying that you list these are the prefixes that you send. These are the VPN prefixes?
No, it's basically traffic selective IPsec tunnel.
Okay, go ahead.
So when you create IPsec tunnel, one thing is mandatory during tunnel negotiation.
Oh, is the endpoint. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so just a quick note that in terms of the setting it up, the secure EVPN talks about how to discover and set up the IPsec session, as well as how we can take instead of using the IKV2, how we can, instead of having a mesh of the IKV2, we can use one single point-to-multipoint signaling using.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I try to avoid that because...
No, I'm saying that it's two parts. I understand, but what I'm saying is both parts are covered. You're covering one part of it, and that's what I said. There is an overlap that needs to be looked into.
Right. I think we've heard several times now that, both the authors and the chairs need to go and kind of untangle the overlapping things. So point taken.
K. Patel, Arcus. The comment that Robert made about taking the list of prefixes and probably moving that TLB into the base draft, happy to do that. Happy to work with you on that, so no problem at all. The other side comment I have, I don't know who to probably target on this, but a general comment that there are 4 different solutions. None of those solutions list out what the route announcement rules should be across the AS, or whether should this attribute be leaked across AS willingly, unwillingly. Maybe it's wise to call out that at least in the draft.
Yeah, agree. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so Mirza is a first-time attendee and a first-time presenter in IDR. Let's give her a nice warm welcome.
Thank you for your work.
Hello, my name is Mersha Zhang from Cisco. So I'm going to present a new draft BGP BFD street mode. This draft was also presented at a BFD working group yesterday. Problem statement. BFD RFC 5882 enables routers to monitor data plane connectivity and detect forwarding path failure. And BGP leverages this specification by using BFD to enhance the faster convergency. Today, BGP neighbor session establishment is independent from the BFD session, BFD state. Because of that, there are some possible failure scenarios when BGP interaction with BFD. Scenario A, a BGP session may be established while BFD session is still down. Scenario B, a degraded or poor quality link may result in the corresponding BFD session going up and down frequently when BGP session is established. So particularly for eBGP, a typical eBGP peer can be multi-hop away. Those scenarios are likely to be observed. The consequence of the impact would be the traffic being black hole, routing queue, and the network interruptions. So we propose the solution is BGP BFD street mode. This proposed draft defines BGP street mode operation as preventing BGP section establishment until speakers have a stable BFD session between them. A new BGP BFD capability is defined for the BGP protocol signaling. The definition of this new BGP BFD capability the code is TBD and the length would be 1 octet. The capability value contains of 1 octet BFD flags. BFD flags contains bit flags related to the BFD. The most significant bit, MSB, is defined as a state of street mode, also called S bit. Operations of street mode are a BGP speaker with BFD street mode enabled must advertise the BGP BFD capability with S bit value set to 1. A BGP speaker which supports BGP BFD capability advertisement must examine BGP BFD capability received from its peer. Only if both the local BGP speaker and its remote BGP peer have a BFD street mode enabled, then BGP session establishment will be prevented until its BFD session is up. If either peer has not advertised BGP BFD capability with street mode enabled, then a BGP session should not be required prior to the BGP session establishment. Conclusion. We have identified the problem of BGP and BFD interaction, which could result in the routing queue and the network interruptions. We propose the solution to the problem refers as BGP BFD street mode. That prevents BGP session establishment until BFD session is up and stabilized. It also enables a BGP speaker to signal its peer additional BFD extension using an optional parameter BFD capability. Following the proposed street mode operations, we avoid the situation which results in the routing queue and minimize the impact of network interruptions. And the next step, just for the reviewer, we are going to revise the backward compatibility section based on the IFC 5492. We're also going to add a new section to specify the detail on the BGP session state the transaction.
Hello, I'm Julius Krobacek. So the draft is a little bit vague about what the problem is. So it says roughly this, that there are some situations in which the BFD session doesn't get established while the BGP session does. Could you give an example of such a situation and what it's due to?
Well, I mean, the situation, part of the situation now come on to all the control protocol, I think. If you refer to the section 4.1 of IFC 5882, it also describes the control protocol's neighbor session establishment problem. This is a common thing, right? So if you want using so we have to do the signaling to break the locking issue.
What was the reference again?
The reference.
You gave a number from memory. You gave an RFC number, right?
Yeah, the IFC 5882, section 4.1.
Okay, I'll do my homework then.
Yes.
Robert Rashuk. So this strict mode has been proposed in OSPF and other groups as well for BFD, but your slide said something interesting, that you don't want to establish BGP session when the link quality is poor. That sounds perfectly great, except BFD today doesn't really determine link quality as such, and link quality may mean different things for different people. BFD today gives you ability to say, oh, the peer is up or down, right? There are proposals in BFD to actually enhance BFD to do more than what is it actually designed for. But I think there is a little bit of a gap if we are using the right tool to evaluate the link quality.
Yeah, this is just, thank you. This is just part of a scenario, yeah. And like, for example, people will handle this case like BFD dampening or other things. So maybe BFD state is still down, but I mean, there's other.
So very briefly, we're starting to run short on meeting time, so the line is cut after Rüdiger, and please keep, make your comment, but keep them short. Thank you.
Alexander Zimov, Yandex. I understand the goal, but I don't understand why you need to negotiate this, their capability between peers. Why you can't just configure it locally?
Repeat your question.
You are trying to not to establish a BGP session before you have a BFD session. But if you have this information from one side, you can just stop establish a session establishment and it will be fine. So why do you need to negotiate these?
The signal, right? Why we need the signal?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
You want to answer?
Okay, answer, and you can correct me. Okay. So the major issue is to avoid the potential deadlock. Okay. If you prevent, your peer doesn't know, or sometimes your peer may be waiting for a session come up before they create the BFD session. So deadlock situation coming, you never be able to establish your BFD neighbor session.
So many vendors already support strict mode, including us. There are situations in which you have it configured on both sides, and normally you want to use it, but you may have a situation like immediately after an upgrade or something where you don't want to use it one time when you come up. And this way, by signaling it, you can handle those situations where you don't want to use it. And there are also what pointed out, there's been bugs where there's been a deadlock between different implementations of strict mode.
Keyur Patel Arcus. I actually like the document, so I have no problems with that. But I would be really interested in knowing exactly what Alexander asked. Why would you need capability? You could hold the peering session at your end locally when you need it, and 4271, which is the base BGP specification, actually has nice section of connection collision inbuilt or defined in there. So at the worst, both ends will keep on retrying. That's about it. But I really don't see the need of capability. So if you take it out, if you think that's the case, then it makes it even more simple.
I think we need it.
Himanshu from Siena. So this is good, but I think this has a limited application in the sense that it doesn't take care of the route reflector clients. So you may be okay with the route for session establishment with the route reflector server and the client, but between the two clients where there is no BGP session and you could have a bad connection and all that stuff. So that part is missing here. Obviously, for the sessions, they are fine. I'm just saying that it has, the scope of that application is somewhat limited. You are saying no?
I would like to draw your attention to draft blah, blah, blah RSBFD.
Blah, blah, blah. Which RFC?
Draft IETF IDR RSBFD.
Okay. It addresses that?
It addresses exactly that use case.
For secure this.
It addresses exactly the use
Okay.
case you described.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jeff Haas speaking as BFD chair and also as a day-to-day BGP developer. This is a real problem. And as we sort of seen at the microphone, people have different ideas about when BFD is used to protect a BGP session. The fundamental issue is that at what point in the BGP state machine do you insist that BFD either get started or to be up and stable before you do things? And we do have day-to-day interop problems, not always necessarily for just bringing up the session, but for things like keep down type behaviors when the protocols actually do say BFD is down, when do they allow it to come back up? This draft is a useful place for us to standardize a behavior that is not standardized either in BFD or in BGP, and that does actually cause interop problems. Cisco and Juniper, for example, and the keep down features do not interoperate, and it causes problems.
So can I ask a clarifying question? Several people have brought up at the mic, oh, we don't need a capability.
So
Would you like to respond to that?
Absolutely. So the motivation here is that without some sort of signaling, it's like, again, what part of the state machine do you bring it up? If you do it at connect, or connect retry, pick your favorite piece of that state machine, you don't necessarily know which behavior do you do. Do you do the one that you've been doing for years, or do you do the one that is tied into the new behavior at a single point that we can interoperate at? So the signaling is a good place to say, now that we know that we're going to look for the capability, we could at least use that as a syncing point for the solution.
Thank you.
Radio for Deutsche Telekom. When I'm looking at the description of what you are trying to do and what you're doing, I note when I advise my customers to establish BFD on BGP sessions, my thinking and my goal is that they tear down the BGP when something bad happens. What you are doing here is kind of the other end of a BGP session. You only want to open it or delay the actual open until you know that the path is clean. I think there might be a different approach to deal with that situation. I would think that it is not necessary that you delay trying to open the BGP. You just have to delay actually using the announcements and potentially hold back on the announcements. I have the gut feeling that the deadlocking that has been talking about can be completely avoided if you take that approach.
Yeah, I would encourage you guys to discuss that further on the mailing list because we're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex, you're next. And just as Alex is getting set up here, I want to say I know that we promised a discussion on the BGPLS BIS proposal, and if anybody who's looking at their watch will see that we just aren't going to have time for that. I'm very sorry. I encourage people who are interested in contributing to that to find Ketan and provide input in as time allows. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Azimov. I work for Yandex. And today I'm going to deliver to you, I hope, final update on BGP Open Policy Draft. So it was here for already 3 years. There was a lot of changes, mergers with other documents, again changes in the functionality, so on. But the key principle was preserved unchanged. So the root leaks are happening because of policy violations. And the root cause of these violations is mistakes that are made by network engineers that do not understand how to apply represent peering policy in their configuration. So this draft just fills this gap. It provides a native way to represent your peering policy in the configuration. So you are just setting your peering policy in the configuration, and after that, the filtering is done automatically. So let's jump to the role specification. As you see, most of the roles are native. If you are a customer, your role is customer. If you are a provider, your role is provider. But what is if you are a route server? You know, from the mathematical standpoint, the answer is clear. There is no difference between Internet exchange point that provides partial connectivity and Internet service provider that can also provide partial connectivity. So I thought that everybody will be happy to name their route server as a provider and go on with this. And I was wrong. Even people that were carefully reading the draft were confused. And so in the last version of the draft, we changed this. So if you are providing a route, if you are a route server, your role is route server. If you are a client of route server, your role is client of route server. So I hope this will solve the problem with uncleanness and uncertain. I was really not happy dropping the ideal math model, but simplicity is the winner. So with this, I would like to ask for working group last call. We have 3 open source implementations. I would be glad to see other vendors join the party. So that's all. Any questions?
We will absolutely add that to our list of things to working group last call. Thanks very much for the concise update. And yeah, floor is open for questions, but please keep them brief if you have them. And in the meantime, I will get the next slide set queued up. Okay.
Okay.
Seeing no questions, thank you very much, Alex.
Lily, is this your first presentation in IDR?
Okay, this is a very simple draft about the BGP flow specification for SRv6. This is the background of this draft. I must say, actually, in the RFC, I think it's 5577, 75, yeah. Have defined the BGP flow specification, SRI for the BGP flow spec, and already defined many component types for the IPv4, IP prefix, IP protocol, and for some draft have defined the layer 2 VPN VLANs for the component types. So for this draft, we just to define 2 new component types for the seed of SRv6. So the first component type is for the whole 128 bits of seed. Even the whole seeds, we also use a pair of operator and the value to for the match rule. In the operator type, operator bytes, we have seen the less than, greater than, and equal, and the value should be the whole seed, 128 seeds. For together with the operator and the value, we can indicate how about a certain exactly seed or a range of the seed to match for the SRV6. So this is very easy to understand together with the operator byte and the value of field. And for, as we all know, for this seed is too long. And for some scenarios, we can just to match some bits or some fields about the seed. Because in the SRV6 network programming, we have seen that the seed format should be locator, function ID, and some arguments. So we give another type, component type to match some field or some bits of this seed to match, such as we also use a pair of operator and the value to indicate the match rule. So in the operator, we defined the type field to indicate which field or which bits we want to match. So now we give 4 bits for in the future, we may have very flexible extend. So till now, we just give 4 default types. First one is for the locator, second is function ID, and also some group together with function, locator and function, or function and arguments. So for the value fields, we use seed and mask to flexible to together indicate the value about the some field or bits of the seed. So together, this is for the second component type. So for these 2 types, we give not only the whole 128 seed to match, but also some bits and fields to match. Okay, so it's very easy to understand. Just to give 2 components for the new SRV6 network. So, sorry. Okay.
Robert Raszuk, so quick question. Why only SID and not, let's say, SRH presence? Why you don't want to match on extension header type? So if I see extension header type anywhere in the packet, I treat it differently, let's say, right?
Yes, actually, yes. But for this, I think we can extend in other draft or something else, but in this draft, just define these 2 types, yeah.
Robin from Huawei, from our point of view, because the SRH is too long for the match, but because the SRV6 can be used as the IPv6 destination, but it is totally different from the IPv6 address. So that's we propose this type because it can match the IP destination address of the IPv6 packet, but it can use it as the SRV6 seed. Okay.
Rafał Juniper. Sorry for my ignorance, I didn't read the draft. So, quick question: which field from the header you are going to compare with that? Is it against the IP header or SR header?
Yeah, it's actually for SR headers that destination address at that time. And also for the seed or bounding seed, I think we can use SR policies first to endpoint. So there's 2 types, I think all can be matched.
But if I receive that update, how I can know? So if I receive that as from the flow spec, how implementation should know what is your intention, what you want to match on? Destination address or destination header? Or?
Destination header, yeah. Yeah.
Any further questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. We have 2 minutes left, but that's just clearly not enough time to have a useful conversation about the BGP-LS BIS. I'm again sorry about that. I encourage you to find Ketan and talk to him about it. Thanks everybody. This was, I thought, very interactive, interesting session. See you next time. Blue sheets, please.
going back to slide.